You're listening to SaskScapes, a podcast featuring the stories of arts, culture, and heritage in Saskatchewan. I'm Kevin Power, and my guest for this episode has been on my wish list of guests since last season. Jack Saddleback has a story that reaches into the very roots of his heritage as First Nations and draws from that heritage a source of strength and courage, the courage to live life authentically, and in doing so has made history. Currently serving as the University of Saskatchewan Student Union President, Jack is the first transgendered person in that role, and lobbies passionately on issues surrounding mental health, LGBTQ and Two-Spirit rights, campus safety, and community engagement. As part of intangible cultural heritage, this episode will inspire you to follow your heart. I'm with Jack Saddleback, who has been on my wish list for quite some time now, and my wish has been granted, and I'm thrilled to be able to finally talk with you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me and for meeting with me. It's a really awesome opportunity, and I look forward to it.
So let's start from the very beginning, as Julie Andrews would sing. You were born in Alberta.
Yes, I was born in Alberta. I am from the Samson Cree Nation in Musquecheese, Alberta. We actually recently, Musquecheese, went back to our original name, which is Musquecheese, and we are formerly Hobbema, Alberta, if folks are wondering where that is. So that's central Alberta. However, I did grow up in Calgary. So.
Right. And when did you come to Saskatchewan?
I came to Saskatchewan in late 2010 for school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. So, let's talk about growing up. What do you want to tell me about your life growing up? How was your family life?
Oh, my family life was pretty interesting and good, actually. So I do identify as a very out and proud Cree, Two-Spirit, transgender gay man. I wasn't born identifying that right off the bat. It took a number of years for me to find out who I am and find out my own identity. But growing up, my family was very much supportive of me in whatever identity that I just felt most comfortable with. I grew up the first 4 years of my life on the reserve, with my grandparents, with my parents, and it was a really interesting time because I was allowed to wear whatever clothes I wanted to. I was allowed to be whoever I wanted to be, and that wasn't necessarily taken as a bad thing. Me being born female, and having my parents allow me to wear boys' clothes, allow me to play with boys' toys, allow me to be rough and tumble as I am, was good for me to be able to get like a grounding for the first stages of my identity. So I was very much just a genderqueer kid, just all around genderqueer.
Are you an only child?
No, I am the youngest of 6 children.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so we have my oldest brother is 10 years older than me. But then when my parents split up, we now have 2 more sisters who came into our family. But I am the youngest of 6 kids, and yeah.
So how did your siblings respond to your identity as it was slowly developing?
Well, the interesting thing about my siblings is, like, growing up, there was no question about it. Like, you can be who you want to be. We are a culture of non-interference. So long as the child is happy, the community is happy,
Wow.
Yeah. So it does take
Can
a
I
community.
sign up to be Cree?
I'll
I want to
send
hit the restart button and come back as Cree.
I'll send you the membership card.
Oh, good. I'll add it with my others.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah, they're really awesome. There are a few times that I recall about my siblings being very open and just awesome. My sister and I, who's 2 years older than me, are fairly close. And when we go out to powwows or whatnot, every once in a while I'll be like, "Hey, just introduce me as like your brother, okay? Like I'm now your brother." She's like, "Okay, yeah, sure, we'll do that." So if that's any indication of how accepting my family members are, like that carried on as I officially came out at a later age. But growing up, it was a good time. I did have some struggles. I'm not going to say it was like a paradise of some sort for any genderqueer kid. As I was going older and going into the school system, my parents, they really started to encourage me to go into the female gender role and, really start to like wear more effeminate things and, play with the girls a bit more, start to help out with the dishes and cleaning, those typical things that what you think about when you think about the female gender role. But I do realize why they would do this. They didn't want to see me be bullied. They didn't want to see me go through the pain of being the point of every joke, Yeah. So as I went into school, I did see that there was a lot of bullying. I always got asked this question about like, are you a boy or are you a girl? Like, what are you? Like, well, I'm me. That's all I am. And with my parents also encouraging me to be more girly, it created a lot of anxiety for me. And then in grade 1, my parents actually split up, so there was a lot of stress as a young person, having to deal with all of this, that being going into school and being bullied and having my parents split up, and so it was an interesting time, but it also got a little darker, and I'm okay with sharing this part of my life story. Is because it did shape a lot of the things that I had to deal with as I grew older. But I actually suffered some. I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse, and this actually happened from some family friends that were in Calgary there, and this was around the time when my parents were getting a divorce, and it could have been like shortly after that. I can't recall. It was a long time ago.
And you're around what age at this point?
I'm about 6, 7,
right
around there. Yeah. So there was a lot going on for the young me, and it created
an understatement.
Yeah. Well, I very much love my family, and I love how we all really came together and got that much closer by really leaning on one another. And realizing that this is a hard time. Our parents are splitting up. My brothers went to boarding school for a while. It was difficult. But
were your grandparents also supportive of your journey through finding your sexual identity? Were they? I'm thinking they were of a generation prior to your parents. Was there any generation bias at
Well,
that level?
I never actually shared my sexual identity with my grandparents, because whoever I'm gonna love, they're gonna like it or not,
Okay, right.
That's their thing, and but it was the gender identity portion that I really wanted them to know when I got older. But looking at how the interaction was like when I was younger, it was okay, There was still a lot of like girls do this and boys do that. Right. And we grew up in I grew up in the Native American church, which is this large ceremonial First Nations kind of church.
Okay.
if that's the easiest way to say
Okay.
it. Yeah. So these are a series of ceremonies that we all partake in. That being like sweats, pipe ceremonies, things like that. So, like growing up in that area, and my grandparents being very much involved in that organization, in that group, in that community, I should say, I got those little hints of like, I'm not going to say it was a blatant transphobia or anything like that, but it was more or less like they grew up in a different time, so their understanding of like what gender is and what quote unquote girls and goys, boys and girls.
Listen, I'm all for boy. I can't repeat what you said. I don't remember.
Girls and goys.
Girls and goys. Power to the boys, girls and boys.
But they came from a different time, so
well, the goy is a non-Jew,
yeah,
so
there we go. Oh yeah, the tongue twisters, and it's interesting.
Right,
like that's where my brain. But yeah, there's like those little indications that you can pick up, and me just being just from the things that I've gone through throughout my life have really honed my listening skills, and just. I was actually talking with a friend about Two-Spirit people and how the challenges that we go through, we're always having to watch our back. We're always having to like be up against the wall and look around to see like, are we safe? Like, are we okay? Like, am I okay? Am I going to be okay in this environment here? And it was those little small interactions throughout my life of like someone saying, "Are you a boy or a girl?" Or girls don't do this, or like, why are you dressing like that? It was those little indications that really started to stand out for me. But my grandparents, coming back to that point, have been pretty supportive. When I was younger, they would gift me like very girly things, right? But then I came out as trans, and I was very open and honest about it with them, and they started to slowly gift me more masculine things, like a vest or a bolo tie, things like that. So it's interesting to note those interactions and how they've changed throughout the years. But I've never felt the need to share my sexuality with them. I'll share like who my partner is at the time.
Mm-hmm.
That being right now I'm engaged to a very fabulous man from Fairview, Alberta. His name is James, and he's. I have no idea like how the universe was just, you've had it tough. Let's give you a break, and here's the person that you're going to spend the rest of your life. And it's like, yeah, get all three.
Every guest I have cries on me. I'm turning into the Barbara Walters of podcast.
Barbara Walters.
Tell me, because we're just sort of assuming that everybody listening to this understands the term Two-Spirit. Tell me a bit about the tradition of Two-Spirit. It goes back quite a way.
Quite a way. So the interesting thing about the term, I'll start off with the term Two-Spirit. It was actually coined in 1990 in Winnipeg by a number of Indigenous LGBTQ individuals who came together, and they realized that our traditions as queer Aboriginal people are not necessarily reflected in the terms and definitions that are used by the mainstream LGBTQ community. So that's where Two-Spirit came in, and Two-Spirit has a number of definitions, and honestly, it depends on from person to person who you talk to, because it's more of like a personal definition that people can take on. I'll get more into how I define myself, but what they wanted to acknowledge within Two-Spirit is that a person's cultural identity and a person's gender and romantic identity are not necessarily separate. They are one and the same, and you can't separate that from me. You're like, I'm not just Cree, I'm not just gay, I'm not just trans. All of these things make up who I am, and that's what Two-Spirit means. It's those things coming together. Now, Two-Spirit traditions in First Nations cultures talks about a person who is able to take on both female and male gender roles, and is able to help out wherever they can in the community. And the interesting thing about Two-Spirit folks is that everyone likes to think that, they're like, there's amazing people who are like super powerful and can shoot like rainbows out of their eyes. And it's like, like, no, Two-Spirit people.
Isn't that living rainbow pony unicorn
the
thing?
More you know.
That's right. Yeah.
But the interesting thing about like Two-Spirit people is that they were a part of the community just like anyone else, and their unique gifts and their talents were utilized to better the community in whatever capacity that they could. Some took on roles as medicine people, some took on roles as adoptive parents to orphaned children. Some people took on roles as artists. There's this really famous Two-Spirit person down from there was the Navajo tribe by the name of Wiwa, and she was a Two-Spirit individual who did a lot of basket weaving. And when they would go to the markets to go and sell their baskets, her baskets would actually sell twice as much as any other artist out there, just because of her skill and whatnot. So that's a little indication of Two-Spirit folks. They weren't necessarily seen as abnormal in most tribes. We can't really tell exactly from all the tribes, but the ones that we've been able to get some information from, for the most part, are very much talking about acceptance within the tribes, acceptance of who they are and respected as the unique individuals that they are. So it's interesting when you look at Two-Spirit folks, but it's coming along. It's coming along.
The Cree Nation has a tremendous opportunity to teach on that level.
That is very true. I think the interesting thing about the Two-Spirit movement, it is actually it's an unspoken movement that's been happening for a number of years. With the gay rights movement coming out, with the Native American movement as well, or the American Indian movement, AIM. And how that's happened back in all of these things started out in the 60s. And I think that's where a lot of Two-Spirit folks really started to see that they now have a place to come back in, or are a part of the communities, have never left the communities. But anyway, I should back up a little bit and how we got to this point. Residential schools came into play. Right. Residential schools are a sad part of our Canadian history. Mm-hmm. And within residential schools, they really started to hammer in this gender binary of boy and girl, and left out, Two-Spirit individuals and those genderqueer folks who were able to thrive in their communities. And some of the settlers who went across America, I'll jump over to America right now, and some of those settlers who came and did all of the data collection about this is how pre-contact looks like. They would leave out Two-Spirit people. There were Two-Spirit folks who are written in very small pieces in history books. So it's almost like a whisper, There's a whisper of Two-Spirit history out there. But they would actually just leave them out of history books because they did not like Two-Spirit people. They didn't like the idea of accepting individuals who are genderqueer or who are gay, things like that. So it's interesting to note that, because now when we go into residential schools, coming back up to Canada, they taught the gender binary, and then they also put in like this daily mantra of Christianity and like all of the beliefs that come with that. And I'm very much a big supporter of individuals who partake in their culture in a nice, kind and respectful way, but this particular way within residential schools was very forceful. It was pretty much like a detention center. They weren't allowed to leave residential schools. They weren't allowed to see their parents. There are some sad photos that you can find that show some teepees right on the edge of a residential school because the parents weren't able to go and visit their kids. So the children themselves were isolated, having to learn a language that they didn't know, having to learn a culture that they didn't know, having to suffer physical and sexual abuse as well as mental abuse was hard. So you can just imagine the intergenerational trauma that has been put into First Nations cultures and communities. And this is where I think residential schools did the most harm was with when we're talking about two-spirit individuals. They did the most harm in teaching homophobia and transphobia, and it's sad to say that it's still there in our communities. There's still a lot of individuals who aren't necessarily the most understanding for whatever reason. But yeah, that's a little history 101. But things have gotten better. Right. Yeah, as I was saying before, the 1960s with the gay rights movement and the American Indian movement, it was on those coattails that Two-Spirit people were starting to be able to get more of a political foothold going forward. And with the 1990 term Two-Spirit coming into play, we now had the ability to say, like, this is our word. This is where we belong as a community, as a queer Aboriginal community. We now have a way to be able to identify with one another in whatever way that is. You know, there are Two-Spirit folks who are trans-identified. There are Two-Spirit folks who are cisgendered and may identify as gay, lesbian, pansexual, what have you. But Two-Spirit itself is it's a term that queer Aboriginal people can take on. However, I should also say not all do, but that's A-okay. Yeah, that's up to them.
Right. Yeah. Tell me at what age you were when you owned your trans identity. Finally started to own that. I mean, there was a point of sussing things out and sort of
feeling it out,
living true to yourself, making sure that you lived in a way that you weren't being bullied. Mm-hmm. But then eventually, when it was time to just own it for yourself, when did that happen? Hey, it's Kevin. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Just a quick reminder that the SaskScapes podcast is available for free on your favorite podcast app, or you can stream it from your browser. Check out the show notes for the link. On the SaskScapes homepage, you'll notice something new under the logo called SaskScapes Plus. You can't miss it. There's a big button saying support with a heart icon next to it. I'd love it if you could click on that button and help keep this podcast series going. When SaskScapes launched in May 2014, it was the first podcast in the province celebrating arts, culture, and heritage. In fact, you'd have been pretty hard-pressed to find any Saskatchewan podcasts. So I'd like to think that we paved the way. It's been because of your support that this podcast is now in its 9th year. Okay, that's it. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
That's an interesting thing that you bring up in regards to the pre-transition transition time, because that did take a while for me. I started off doing drag, and that's where I realized, like, wow, this being masculine all the time, being a man all the time is, it's nice, So performance helped for me to figure out my own identity, and then I started trying it at home in my bedroom, and then from my bedroom out into the house, down the block and into school, things like that. But I didn't start to really own it until probably about a year or two, maybe 2.5 later. It was at the age of 18 when I knew, like, this is me, like I can be me all the time. I don't have to think like I have to choose between either or. I can just be Jack. And I started feeling out names. I think that's where because I was going by Cheyenne for a number of years. That's what my full name is Serena Cheyenne Saddleback, and Serena is my first name, but my sister is Sabrina. So whenever my mom would get mad or whatnot, she'd yell one of us over that we'd both come running because our names are so similar. So they're like, "We're gonna call you Cheyenne." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I'm cool." So I've already gone through one name change throughout my life. So it was interesting to look at these names and to find out, like, what would I like to do, and. At the age of 18, I went through a couple of different names, but then I realized I'm going about this all wrong, I need to find out why are these names not working for me. And for me, it just kind of clicked that my parents need to do this. You know, I'm their kid. You know, I'm their child. They raised me. I'm here. You know, I'm alive. I'm thriving. I think they should also have some say in this as well. So I went over to my mom, you know, because she's my life giver. You know, she birthed me. She held me for 9 months, 10 months, whatever. And I asked her, Mom, what would you have named a boy if you would have had one? She had no idea. So then I went to my dad. I'm like, Dad, what do you would have named a boy if you would have had one? He had no idea. So both of my parents, my birth parents, that being my mom and my dad, had no idea. And then I was like, And then I went over to my stepmom, and she's actually. This is an interesting story in regards to our relationship as stepmom and a son. I take her as a third parent because I've known her since I was, I don't know, like 8, 9, 10, something like that, and she helped me out a lot when I was going through my depression and my suicide and my suicidal attempts. She was there. She was there to drive me to queer youth groups, you know, when I wanted to, and you know that was hard for us, especially living out where we were. It would take a long time to get to the queer youth groups, but she understood that, you know, it's important for this young person to be able to identify with other young people and to see themselves. So I admire her a lot for really stepping up and being a mom, you know. And just doing it. I wasn't living with my mom at the time when I was going through the suicidal stuff, just because it was a bit too much in Calgary. So I moved to Hoboken with my dad and my stepmom and my 2 younger sisters. But
this is prior to you're 18.
Yeah,
you're not 18 yet.
No, I'm about 14 here with the suicidal thoughts.
And is that? Yeah. Could you link at that time, or do you now link the depression to part of that journey of coming out? Was that what that was about?
There are a number of layers to that, but I definitely think that coming into puberty, it was almost, I felt like I was being pushed to a cliff edge, you know, and there was no way of stopping it. And I started getting very depressed. I started getting very moody, you know, hormones and all that, puberty.
Right, right?
Yeah. But also, I couldn't really put my finger on what the issues were. I knew like the child sexual abuse that was a factor in things. Having to deal with my sexual identity as well was also a factor in things. But I didn't realize that the gender identity and the puberty being linked into all of this was something that was apparent to me, you know. But now when I look back, like, no, I was pretty depressed because I wasn't able to fully express myself. You know, I didn't feel the freedom of being able to do that. I wasn't able to talk about and wasn't comfortable talking about my child sexual abuse at that time and the trauma that it gave me. I wasn't able to feel free in expressing who I was infatuated with, you know, things like that. So when I was going through that depression, you know, my stepmom was very much there for me, which is awesome. All my parents were there for me. But she was just able to help out in ways that I didn't really know, that being like taking me to queer youth groups, that being helping me stay on my medication and do all of that being antidepressants so I could go through, and just being there, which was good. And so when I come back to the name thing, that's where my third parent came into play. And I went over to my stepmom and I was like, what would you have named a boy if you would have had one? And even before I finished that question, I couldn't even finish it, she automatically said Jack. And it just felt right, you know, it just felt right. And I was like, yeah, Jack, that's me. So I think once I found like my name and all of that, I think like that's when I was really like, here I am. I'm feeling pretty good about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned antidepressants as being that's the medical model that we're most familiar with, but I read somewhere that you also found healing through traditional therapies within your own culture. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about coming back to when I was about 14 years old, and we all lived on the reserve for about a year and a half, and that's when I was going through my really deep depression and suicidal thoughts. One of the things that I really attribute to my healing and my road to recovery is traditional ceremonies. That being, I partook in a lot of Native American church meetings, sweats as well, things like that, and just praying and going to a school that was actually invested in Indigenous cultures, in the Cree culture. I went to the Ermineskin Junior Senior High School during that time, and every morning they would have this bowl of sweetgrass and sage burning there as people were coming into class. And every time we would have an assembly or things like that, we would always have like a welcome from an elder. And, like First Nations cultures was just intertwined with the education system at that particular school. But coming back to the ceremonies and how that helped me, it was good to be able to find my identity as a First Nations person, and really know that it's okay to lean on my community and let them know, like, I'm hurting right now and I need help. And they heard and they helped, which was pretty awesome. Yeah, but the medication, I was on that for a while as well, and I just needed to retrain my brain, really needed to get it out of those ruts that it was stuck in, of like depression, of constantly putting myself down. I needed to stop and retrain it, and that's where the medication portion of things went into play. Some folks, have some hard time looking at medications and feeling like they don't need it, and that's okay. Like, not everyone does, and everyone's road to recovery is different. And I struggled as well with whether or not I wanted to go on medications. But actually, my stepmom, she told me a really good thing. She said, if a person's sick and they need something like medicine, I think she used a diabetes reference. If you need insulin, then you need insulin. Things like that. But if you don't want it, that's okay. You can do other things. So it was interesting. So I need to reconcile my own stigma behind medications, and after that, it was okay in regards to my road to recovery, because I had the medication, I had my cultural ceremonies, and I also had the queer youth groups that I went to. So those things really played a lot in me being able to get my feet back on the ground and to find out, what do I do now? Where can I go? And what's my path? Yeah.
So when did you own Jack?
When did I was probably about like 19 or 20 because I was going through that weird transition state of like, what name did I want? And then that's when my stepmom said like Jack, and I was like, that's my name. There we go. Luckily enough, it rhymes too. So.
Right. Yeah, right. And but then you had to go around and tell everybody that you were now wanting to be called Jack.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, is that typical, that part of the transition for someone? I mean, obviously you can't make generalizations because everybody's road is different, but is owning a name sort of ground zero of where you start with this? Do you long before any kind of consideration around physical transformation happens, do you own a name?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the social transition within that self, like the community transition, it takes a number of years, and it didn't start with my name, because I was out by that point as being transgender, as being a man. I just didn't have a concrete idea of like what name did I want, or what name is me, like this identity that's been suppressed for so long. I didn't have a name for it. And for my understanding and my own understanding of my journey is that the social transition happened long before the name. The name just helped to give voice to my identity that's been suppressed for so long, and now people can see who I am, and now they can be like, oh, hello, Jack. You know, they weren't able to say that before, so now they can, and this is who I am, and it's really empowering to go out there and be like, this is me. You know, this is who I should have been like all along, but you know, I had to go through a number of challenges to be able to find out who I am, and I'm also kind of grateful that just for my whole journey. You know, it's strange to say that, but it's good because I know myself that much better. You know,
I'm going to ask a question, and I have no idea how to ask it because
Sure.
there's a part of me that's ashamed of the fact that I'm a part of the LGBTQ community, and still I don't know the political correctness around a lot of things because I grew up in a very, very different time. And especially now, because we're living in a time when we've got people saying I identify as being black and they're white. You know, and they've represented the NAACP. I don't want to date this podcast, but that's what's current in our news headlines right now. But you know, so what about the person that says, well, what do you mean you're telling people you identify as male? I mean, clearly you're going through puberty and you're developing as a female. So how do you convince yourself and then other people that for all intents and purposes you are physically growing as a female, yet you're telling people you identify as a male?
Well, I think the interesting thing about like nowadays, it's awareness about the human experience itself. Everyone is different, and we all have our own paths that take place, but everyone goes through the same human experience of finding out 4 identities, sometimes 5. The first one being your gender identity. This is what's between your ears. This is your internal perception of who you are. Then there's your gender expression. That's how you express that gender identity, that being your clothes, your mannerisms, the roles that you take on. The third identity would be your birth sex. So that's the genitals. That's like what's between your legs. And then there's the fourth, which is the romantic identity. And that's what I like to joke about as the legs that you want to be between, you know.
I love it.
So every individual goes through these identities, and regardless of wherever you stand on the spectrum of each of those identities, you are normal as an individual. You know, you are normal as a human being. And I think the only convincing that needs to happen is the actual awareness of these identities that everyone goes through. And we are in a different time. We're in a time where we can connect with people wherever they're at, and we can use language that is familiar to them so they can start to build on their awareness about, oh, you know, every human is different. You know, every human goes through different things, and that's a-okay if they're different from me. You know, they could be born male and identify as male, or they could be born male and identify as female. Like that's a-okay. Or they could be loving a man and identify as a man. Like, regardless, the human experience is very unique and pretty cool if you ask me. Like I'm a sociology major, so I like to look into cultures and look into people, look into society, and how are we progressing? How are these systemic discriminations keeping the most vulnerable still in that place of vulnerability? So when I think about convincing, and it isn't really convincing, it's awareness, really.
But it feels to me like that's an incredibly forward-thinking place to be in one's life, and it doesn't feel to me like culture on the whole, mainstream culture, has not embraced that way of thinking yet. I mean, we're still trying to get our heads around, were you born gay, or are you a product of, is it nature or nurture? I mean, so then to go to this whole other level of these 4 stages that you talked about is just, it doesn't feel like the world is coming along for the ride quite yet. I mean, are we living in a bit of a bubble as far as we have the luxury of choosing the community and friends that we want that reflect the way we move through life, but generally, does the world support that?
Well, people like to call me a dreamer, and I'm a-okay with that type of title.
Okay.
I'd like to, as Gandhi says, be the change that you want to see in the world.
Right.
And as I'm going out there doing these talks and with communities that, at times can be hostile towards trans individuals, can be hostile towards gay individuals, I'd be okay with going out there and putting myself out there as a person, because I want to see a better tomorrow for those young people who are coming up. I want to see a better education for them. I want to see a better social interactions for them, because I think about my social interactions as a young person and how difficult it was for me just to be alive. I don't want that difficulty to be for other young people. I don't know who they are. I don't know what they're going to identify as. I don't know where they're going to come from, but I do know that I want to see them in a world that is going to love and respect them for who they are.
Right.
Yeah.
Backtracking a bit, when do you make the decision to begin a physical transformation?
That would definitely be like a person to person basis. I know for myself, I couldn't identify with my voice. I think if that would be like the number one thing. When I look at these older videos that I have, it's strange. It's almost like it's such a disconnect that I feel within myself. Like I know that's me, but that's also not me. When I see older videos and I see me talking, it doesn't feel like me. But now when I see myself talking now and I hear my voice, I connect with it. Like that's me. That's who I am. So it's interesting to feel that at ease with oneself now, when before it was so much anxiety. It was so much, I don't know, kind of like isolation within oneself. And when I was thinking about going through physical transition as a transsexual person, like not all transgender people use medical, what we call quote unquote interventions to transition. But for myself, I chose to go on testosterone because I wanted to feel like me. I wanted to connect with me. And since then, it's just been, almost feels as if like testosterone should have always been in my system. And my brain works differently now. I feel more at ease. My anxiety levels are down. My depression levels are down. And it's interesting. Yeah.
I'd like to dispel the myth that people can just walk randomly into their doctor's office and say, I'd like to physically change my gender now. That the medical model out there isn't making this an overnight procedure, or day surgery or anything. Like this is a well thought out, carefully considered, guided. I mean, I'm assuming, I know people who have, had to go through a lot of counseling as well. In conjunction with their doctor, to make sure that emotionally they're ready to embrace this. I mean, is that true?
Oh, Kevin, you would not imagine the amount of hoops that a trans person has to jump through just to get basic health care first off, but also to try and just start the actual medical transition. When I first came out, I was living in Calgary at the time, so I was about 18 around when I was out as a trans person and was thinking about going on testosterone. Then I believe I turned 19. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And this is kind of like a rough formula that happens from province to province, but every province is different. So within Alberta, you have to go see a psychiatrist for about a year as they put you through, quote unquote, a real life test. This is where you are living as the gender that you will be transitioning into, and you have to be that gender 24/7, So you have to be you 24/7 before they even consider going on testosterone or like estrogen, things like that. And that's huge, because after that, when I was living in Calgary, they actually they took off trans health and cut the funding for it. So as a young person, I was halfway through my real life test with my psychiatrist, and they cut the funding, and I was like, what do I do now? I can't afford any of this. Right. That being surgeries and what have you. And it's not unheard of that those hoops happen in every province. Here in Saskatchewan, I'm not too entirely sure about the beginning stages. They're the same rough formula, but when I came here, I was already out for 5 years, and my story is a little bit different from individuals who would be here in Saskatchewan and then starting to transition. Because I was out for 5 years and going through the medical system in Alberta, and then came here, found my doctor, said, "Hey, I want to start testosterone," and told them my story, and they're like, "Oh, well, you already know who you are. You've already gone through the processes over in Saskatchewan." So they sent me over to the endocrinologist right away, and then I went to go see the psychiatrist just to do a little bit of follow up to ensure that everything's that I'd be okay, because you're going through a second puberty, and puberty within itself is
right.
It's kind of a hard thing to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it is a lot of hoops to go through. I also feel that when we're looking at surgeries here in Saskatchewan, they only cover 25% of the actual surgery cost, whether or not you're a female to male or male to female. That's only 25% of the surgery cost. So that doesn't include like transportation to and from. That doesn't include accommodations, what have you. All those little things that add up to quite a lot of money. None of that is covered, and you can only get that 25% back after you pay up front and then get the reimbursement. And we don't have anyone who does top surgeries here in Saskatchewan, nor do we have anyone who does phalloplasties, which is quote-unquote bottom surgeries for trans women, that being male to female. I'm not too entirely sure what doctors would be readily available in this province, but it's sad to see that trans folks are just not able to get the basics of care, and being put through so many hoops. It's interesting. However, one of the good things that I'd like to, on the brighter side, the Saskatchewan government recently put on the Saskatchewan Human Rights Code. It now includes gender identity as something that a person cannot discriminate against. So that's pretty big. And with other provinces, if history has told us anything, once that gets on the Human Rights Code, then other things will start coming along, such as healthcare. Yeah.
Did it feel like a window opened up when you were finally on the other side of your transition?
I think I would call it like a different stage in my transition, and a window totally did open. I just felt like so much at ease, like it was like a big sigh of relief, you know?
Yeah.
Because for a number of years I was having to go through these hoops in Alberta, where folks were telling me, "Oh, you're too young. You don't. This is just a phase. You're gonna have to wait for like a year or two before you even get on in." And I was like, "This is ridiculous. Like, I've already gone through all the things that you've wanted me to, and you're still making me go through more hoops." So now when I came here, it just ever so happened to work out perfectly. Like the universe was just like, "Here you go," But that's not every story. That just happens to be mine.
Right.
Yeah.
And then another window of opportunity opens for you. And now I realize I'm fast forwarding here, but we're sitting here at the Student Union office at the University of Saskatchewan, and you're not the first First Nations Student Union president, but you are the first trans person. That must have felt amazing on a whole bunch of levels, but do you feel tremendously proud of this university that they are in a mindset where that would even be considered a possibility?
Kevin, it honestly feels like a dream. It feels like this isn't even real. And I say this because it's the best of scenarios in regards to what has transpired throughout this last little while. And I am completely humbled by the university, by the students here, who saw my skills, saw my experience, and saw my passion for change here on campus, and didn't necessarily take into account that all my identities, that's who I am, but they didn't see it as a shortcoming. They saw it as an added bonus, Oh, you happen to be gay. Oh, you happen to be trans. Oh, you happen to be First Nations. Good for you. But we see that you have these skills. We see that you have the experience within the USSU, and we see that you have had the passion for a number of years in creating change here on campus. And I remember the election day, and I remember, well, no, first, I'm going to rewind and go back to even considering running. I had no idea that I wanted to at all.
Yeah, because you could have very easily been setting yourself up as a big dartboard to just be lambasted.
Huge dartboard.
Yeah.
Because I thought my identities were going to be a factor in people not voting for me. I thought people were going to say I was too brown. I thought people were going to say, he's too gay. I thought people were going to say, oh, well, he's trans, what have you. And it wasn't until about 30 minutes before the actual nomination period time closed, when I was talking with a friend, a really good friend of mine, and her name is Annie Batiste, so a little shout out to her. And I was talking with her, and she said, you know what, Jack? You have to give them the chance. Yes, you are First Nations. Yes, you are gay. Yes, you are trans. But you have to give them the chance to choose whether or not they're ready for it. And it turns out they are.
Did any darts get thrown?
If there were, I didn't hear about them.
Right.
So, my support, my circle of support is really awesome. And anytime that there are times where there are some not pleasant things said, but I'm able to go to them and really kind of decompress and be like, okay, this person may have had just a bad day, or this person just is not understanding of the issues, things like that. But if there were darts thrown, I didn't hear about them, and I went into this whole thing with very much a humbled mindset, that being, I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for change, because I want to see a sexual assault policy here on campus. We don't have one, and sexual assault is a huge issue here at the U of S. Right. And I want to see a mental health strategy, because we don't have one as well. It was an interesting time going into the elections, and all the way through, my partner James actually didn't want me to run. He saw the amount of stress that the vice president position gave me, but I honestly had no idea really what I was getting into when I came into the vice president's position last year as the student affairs portfolio. So it was an interesting time, but I think once I really committed to this, he understood, okay, you really want to see this happen and go through. And since I made that decision, he is super supportive. He was there during the postering night when we put everything up. He was out there talking with people as well. And he's been the best first lady you could ever ask for.
Is that a title he's owning? Or
that's a title he's owning. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
A little bit of Jackie O right there.
Right. Oh, the wardrobe possibilities.
Right.
But you were also given an important role within the mental health community of this province, yes?
They're twofold there. So I've been sitting on the Mental Health Commission of Canada's Youth Council for the past 5 years, and I'm the Saskatchewan rep. And then last year, I was also a part of this national campaign called the Faces of Mental Illness, which is a national anti-stigma campaign in regards to mental illness. So I was one of 5 faces from across Canada, and it was pretty big, because I think that it was the very first time that they started to be able to talk about trans issues on a national level in conjunction with mental illness, and how society, the way it's created, can create a lot of stress for people who are genderqueer, who fall outside of the gender binary, or who don't want to adhere to the gender binary, and how that can create a lot of depression and anxiety, and at times lead to suicide. And the statistics are pretty high, and we need to stop that. Yeah.
You couldn't have possibly imagined when you were 14, but what would you tell your 14-year-old self now, knowing how this road has rolled out before you? I know that there have been struggles along the way. I don't make it sound like it's just been a bed of roses, but it really is quite an inspiring journey that you've led. But when you were 14, you wouldn't have felt this at all, and things felt pretty black. So what do you tell somebody who's 14 that feels like you did when you were 14?
If I were to be able to sit down with my 14-year-old self and look him in the eye, I tell him this world, yes, it is a harsh place. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a tough place. But it also can be a very beautiful place. There's a lot of opportunities out there. And it'll take time. But you have a lot to give as a person. And I just think about like that day when I was actually holding the knife in my hand and I had some blood coming down from my arm. I remember being in Nose Hill Park in Calgary there because it's known as a place where First Nations people gather, and I wanted to end my life there because I wanted to be with my people. And I remember taking that knife, and I had it on my wrist here, and I still have the scars. And I was cutting, and I all of a sudden had this feeling inside me of like, no, not now. Like, it's not your time. And I want young people to know that life is good. We need to work together to be able to make it better for others. And there's a world of experiences out there that you couldn't even fathom. But when you get there, don't look back because there's so much more to come.
You met the Queen.
Oh yeah, I met the Queen. Yeah. That
the
was
Queen.
The Queen. Yeah.
Just to be clear, we're talking the Queen.
Yeah, the Queen of England. There. Yeah, she. So I entered into this art contest with a number of youth from across Canada, and it was for the Canadian Museum of Human Rights through this organization. Ignite, I believe, was the contest name, and they asked for art pieces that would talk about human rights, and I took this photo of myself, and it's just myself wearing a beaded vest. And the reason why I took it and the angle that I took it at shows a lot of like resilience and a lot of, I feel like empowerment and power in there. And what I wanted to talk about was Aboriginal rights and transgendered rights, because I'm a very ambiguous individual in that particular photo, so you can't necessarily tell whether or not I'm male or female. So I submitted that, and they said, "Oh, this is pretty awesome. Why don't you?" I went for Alberta, and then they flew us out to Winnipeg, and it wasn't until we got in Winnipeg that we found out that we were going to meet the Queen and that she was going to see our artwork, and I think that was just also a very humbling experience and really, really strange. So when I think about like those experiences that I'm talking about, where you can't even fathom what you're going to get into, because life is just that strange. You know, I didn't know that I was ever going to be flown out to Winnipeg, have a limo pick me up, and like it was just this weird time, because I grew up in poverty. So to go through all of this and to have like these fancy foods and like these tours for places, and then to also have like the Queen, the Prime Minister was there at the time, her husband as well, the Duke, and all these other quote unquote important people were there, and there I am, like this little trans kid, and I had some long hair at that time because I was trying to grow it out for my culture, and it was just so baffling to think that I would be in that position. And I was also feeling a lot of emotion because I thought about my younger self and about like, you would have never known that you would be here, but you kept going, and you kept thinking like, there's got to be something. Not now, it's not your time. to take your life. And I am forever grateful for that young person for putting down that knife and allowing this story to continue and for this story to also help empower other people. Because I don't want another young person to take their life because they feel that they don't belong in this world.
So we have to complete the trifecta. We've mentioned First Lady, we've talked about the Queen, but there's also a princess.
Or princess.
Go back to your childhood.
Yeah, that's right. My dog.
Right.
Yeah, my dog. My dog was actually. I'm glad that you bring that up. She. I just think about her from time to time and how lovable she was. Okay, my dog is actually a wolf husky cross, and my parents got her from my uncle who was living out in I think it was Rocky Boy, and he gifted this dog to us right when it was like just a little pup. And I grew up with this dog for about 12 years. We had to leave her on the res because she's a little bit too big to move to Calgary with us. But every time I would come back, like she'd recognize me. She's like, "Oh, hey!" She's the best dog ever. She passed away when I was about 12 years old, and I still remember seeing her and how she died in her sleep and how peaceful that must have been for her. And she lived a really long and good life, and she was a big protector for me and just my best friend.
I want to bust one final stereotype here. This is probably the hardest thing to grapple with, but here it goes. You don't like corn.
No.
And you are First Nations. How do you live with yourself?
I think a lot of people ask me that as well. I just don't like it. It's something that I.
You can be trans, you can be gay, you can be whatever, but corn.
But he doesn't like corn.
That's just a blatant betrayal of your culture.
Oh, I know. I make up for it though. I'll only eat it in ceremony. That is the only place where I will eat corn.
How is it eaten in ceremony?
Oh, just the way it is.
Okay, on the cob.
Most people take it off the cob.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's the only place I'll eat it. Anywhere else, if there's corn in a certain dish, I won't order it.
But if it's popped, you're okay with it being popped.
I love popcorn. I love popcorn.
Right. Okay, so you're just squeaking. Otherwise, you might lose your card completely.
There you go. Got to take your status card. Sorry.
Right. I hope you're proud of yourself, is all I can say. I know we've talked about, how proud we are of the university for being so open-minded, but dang, you got to be proud of yourself.
Thank you. I always bring it back to that young person I'm of my past, and I'm proud of that person for jumping into the unknown, I'm proud of the community that I've had. I'm proud of the family that I've been able to be blessed to be born into and to create around myself as well.
Yeah.
I'm proud of the support that they give me. I'm proud of the students here, and at times, I reflect, and I'm pretty proud that I took the risk. I took that opportunity to jump into the unknown, not knowing where it would go. And I just would love to see other people be inspired to take the leap as well.
Well, the jumping isn't over yet for you. There'll be many more jumps that you take, and may they all be a smooth landing.
Frequent flyer, let's just put it that way.
Right. Jack, thank you so much for sharing your story.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. The SaskScapes podcast is created and hosted by Kevin Power for Sask Culture. Funding to the cultural sector is provided through the Saskatchewan Lotteries Trust Fund for Sport, Culture, and Recreation. For more information, visit iheartculture.ca and saskculture.ca. Music for SaskScapes is provided by Saskatchewan-born singer-songwriter Jeffrey Straker. There's no end to the stories to be told. So, until next time...